listening to Give God 90, where we're not afraid of the tough biblical questions, because we will dig through the language, the culture, and the history to find the truth revealed in the words of our Creator.
Hello, everyone. Happy Thursday.
Happy Thursday, everyone.
Yes, I am being supervised very closely tonight.
Yes, he is.
Which probably isn't all bad. Oh, goodness. We're glad that you chose to spend some time with us, or allow us to spend some time with you, or however that works.
Right. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to listen to us.
Absolutely. Lots going on. We are no longer in the frozen tundra that was East Tennessee. Although we're still in East Tennessee, we're just
not a frozen tundra
not a frozen tundra anymore. The ice is just about melted all away, finally. Our winter here lasts a few days. Real winter. The winters that we're used to. But when you spend years in northern Colorado, you get used to 40 degrees below zero, which is the same on the Celsius scale as it is the Fahrenheit scale. It's the only place they meet. And yes, we've seen it.
Many times.
A few times. But one of the nice things about here is it's usually warmer. So we're appreciative of that. If you haven't been to Give God 90 lately, you might want to check that out. Check out the books. They're still available. That's kind of how we pay for all the things we do. And hopefully you'll order some. It's that simple. Before we get started tonight, I want to let you know I received an email today from Spreaker, and they are going to terminate the live podcast portion. So if you're listening live, you have a year. So in reality, there's a lot of people around the world that don't have the bandwidth for video, and they enjoy the podcast. But there's a lot of people around the world that also have been asking for video, so you never know where this might lead. We might... I'm getting faces made at me again.
Nobody wants to see the faces I give you.
Yeah, we have a face for radio, that's for sure. But you never know where this might lead. We may do some other things, but for the folks that don't have the bandwidth and need the audio, we'll do everything we can to make that happen for you. So who knows what the future will bring? Well,
nobody knows.
Jehovah knows, but
yep.
He's the only one.
That's
it. Excuse me. So we've in this series of the feast from Leviticus 23. We've looked at the Sabbath, we've looked at Passover, first fruits, and now we come to the Feast of Weeks, Shavuot. And I should say that the Feast of Weeks gets its name mostly because of the counting of the weeks, the counting of the Omer, as they say. And that comes to pass from first fruits to Shavuot. The counting is actually given to. Why can't I talk tonight? The counting is given to us twice in two different ways. From the day that you make the wave offering of the new grain of first fruits, you count 7 weeks. That's why they call it Feast of Weeks. But then Moses writes that you're to count 50 days. Now, that might seem a little strange because 7 weeks is 49 days, the way we count it. But in the well, I shouldn't say ancient Hebrew. It's not ancient. It's only 4,500 years old. The way they counted, it started with the day. So you count 50 days. Is that kind of, did I explain that kind of right? You include the day you're on. That was the way that they did it. The Hebrew and the Greek versions of math don't exactly line up all the time. It's kind of hard to explain. But think of it this way. When we think of a diameter, it's across a circle. The early Hebrew people didn't think of it that way. They thought about it as the circumference. It was a line cast about. You would look at the circumference of the circle, not the diameter of the circle. They included, and it comes from the inclusion of the entire thing, not from taking a portion. So when they, for the very early Hebrews at Moses' time, when you counted, you didn't start with tomorrow. You started with now. Okay, that makes sense. All right, as long as it makes sense. An interesting kind of a little side note is a few years ago, the modern Jewish calendar that's published every year, Shavuot fell on a Tuesday or Wednesday. Can't remember exactly which. And that's because there was a little bit of a dispute on what day first fruits fell that year. Now, Leviticus 23:16 actually reads to count until the day after the seventh Sabbath. Now, let's think about this for a moment, because it doesn't matter how many Sabbaths you count, the next day is always going to be the first day of the week. So, we call that Sunday today. So Shavuot will always fall on the first day of the week. I don't know how they came up with something in the middle of the week, but for some strange reason they did. Just kind of one of those weird things that happens from time to time. And I guess that's what happens when you get a room full of rabbis that can't agree on anything. But anyway, and I've said this before, and the Jewish people will tell you, if you have 10 rabbis in a room, you're going to have 20 different opinions. It's just the way it is. But Myra's going to read about Shavuot.
From the day after the Sabbath, the day you brought the sheaf of the wave offering, you are to count off 7 full weeks. You shall count off 50 days until the day after the 7th Sabbath, and then present an offering of new grains to the Lord. Bring 2 loaves of bread from your dwelling as a wave offering, each made from 2/10 of an ephah of fine flour, baked with leaven as the first fruits to the Lord. Along with the bread, you are to present 7 unblemished male lambs, a year old, 1 young bull, and 2 rams. They are to be burnt offerings to the Lord, together with their grain offering and drink offerings, an offering made by fire, a pleasing aroma to the Lord. You shall also prepare 1 male goat as a sin offering and 2 male lambs, a year old, as a peace offering. The priest is to wave the lambs as a wave offering before the Lord, together with the bread of the first fruits. The bread and the 2 lambs shall be holy to the Lord for the priest. On that day you are to proclaim a sacred assembly, and you must not do any regular work. This is to be a permanent statute wherever you live for the generations to come. When you reap the harvest of your land, do not reap all the way to the edges of your field, or gather the gleanings of your harvest. Leave them for the poor and the foreign resident. I am the Lord your God. Leviticus 23, verse 15 through 22.
Okay. Now, the 50 days, Christians, this is for you, is where the modern church gets the name Pentecost. Because Pent is 5, and in the Greek, Pentecosta means 50 days. Because Shavuot is known as a pilgrimage feast where everyone should be in Jerusalem to celebrate it, it would be perfectly natural for people from all over to be in Jerusalem. One of the things that the modern church fails to realize, though, when it teaches about Pentecost, is that no matter where you were from, this is important, no matter where you were from, when you were in Jerusalem, especially around the temple, and the temple has, it was a big place. It wasn't just the temple proper. There wasn't, the courts surrounding it and the other areas. You were expected to speak Hebrew. So something else the church fails to teach is that when the disciples were accused of being drunk, and Peter says, hey, wait a minute, it's only 9 o'clock in the morning, the modern church forgets about this passage in Deuteronomy. Go ahead and read that.
You must be sure to set aside a tenth of all the produce brought forth each year from your fields, and you are to eat a tenth of your grain, new wine, and oil, and the firstborn of your herds and flocks, in the presence of the Lord your God, at the place he will choose as a dwelling for his name, so that you may learn to fear the Lord your God always. But if the distance is too great for you to carry that which the Lord your God has blessed you, because the place where the Lord your God will choose to put his name is too far away, then exchange it for money. Take the money in your hand and go to the place the Lord your God will choose. Then you may spend the money on anything you desire, cattle, sheep, wine, strong drink, or anything you wish. You are to feast there in the presence of the Lord your God and rejoice with your household. And do not neglect the Levite within your gates. He has no portion or inheritance among you. Deuteronomy 14, verse 22 to 27.
Aren't you glad I didn't make you read the King James in that? I like the way the King James puts that, because it says, whatever your soul lusteth after. I don't know why I get a kick out of it. I just think that's, I guess, funny. Apparently, from what we read and what we know and what the history books teach us as well, it was quite customary for these celebrations to be celebrated. It was quite possible that when the people heard the language, any language other than Hebrew being spoken around the temple, they just naturally assumed these folks were drunk, because typically, no matter how many languages you might speak, if you're inebriated, drunk, you're always going to revert back to the language that you're used to speaking. Now, if you've ever been around somebody who is extremely excited about something, they will often revert back to their native language. I knew somebody years ago, and this fellow spoke a lot of different languages. He was amazing. He could hear a language for a few sentences, and he could pick it up. I mean, he was amazing. He did this so well that he actually became an interpreter for the court system. But when he got a little angry or he got very, very excited about something, really happy, he would always revert back to his native language, which happened to be Spanish. And he was excited about something one day, and he started speaking Spanish, and we're all like, wait a minute, you're the only one who knows what you're saying. The languages being spoken on the day of Shavuot or Pentecost, they weren't some obscure gibberish. They were the many languages for the areas where the people came from. And they were so excited that they simply reverted back to their own language. It's why we have the list of areas that people came from in Acts chapter 2. So hopefully that kind of helps clear up some things, that the 120 disciples referred to in Acts chapter 1, okay, they were not in some little rinky-dink apartment, the upper room, when all this happened. And I know that's what a lot of denominations might teach, but they were actually not in the temple proper, but on the Temple Mount in an area known as Solomon's Porch. It's referred to often. That would have been a place where, everybody could have heard what was going on, and they were like, these folks are just plain drunk, right? But if you pay close attention to what's written in the New Testament, the disciples were always in that particular area of the temple. It was kind of a out of the way place. They could go there and meet. People would sort of leave them alone. It was just a natural meeting place, and it was large enough to hold all 120 disciples at the time. But let's get back to Shavuot. All right. It remembers the day that the Creator came down on Mount Sinai in a cloud of smoke and fire. All right. The people saw his voice speaking to them. So yes, it's the day that the Ten Commandments were given. The mixed multitude that represented the people of the world were told these matters in which they should live. And I would add, these are matters in which all people of the world will be judged. It's that simple. Today, the people who celebrate Shavuot, they'll typically eat sweet treats to remind us of the sweetness of the Creator's words, right? And usually, traditionally, they're going to include treats made with dairy and honey to remind us of the land of milk and honey. As much as I don't really like tradition, this is one I do tend to enjoy, okay?
Yes, you do.
The cheese blintzes, the milkshakes, all the good stuff that's bad for you. Well, depending on how it's made. So we'll just leave it at that. I don't know. I just can't get over the dish of ice cream with pouring honey over the ice cream. Ooh, that's just good stuff right there. But as the sales pitch goes, but wait, there's more, right? During Shavuot, it is, again, tradition to read or listen to the first 5 books of the Bible. Reading the Word, hearing the word of the Creator is the most important part of this. A lot of people will actually start in Exodus, so they get to Exodus chapter 20 fairly quickly, and then they will back up and read Genesis and then Numbers, Leviticus, and Deuteronomy. Some people just start in Genesis. They make you wait for the good stuff. And people will stay up all night. They'll read their portion and they'll listen to everybody else. And after all, if you're going to attend, why can't I talk tonight? If you're going to attend the Creator's party, it's probably a good idea to listen to what he has to say. And think about this. That this celebration actually comes at a time when the spring planning would be done, but before the work of the summer actually gets underway. You see, when we actually follow the Creator's calendar, all of his appointed times, they come when the workload should be fairly light. But people being people, we have a way of even making a celebration work. People work at resting on the Sabbath. They make such a big deal out of it that they don't actually get any rest. I don't know why. It's a day when you just kind of take a breath and say, that week's done. Thank you. You've gotten us through this week. And by the way, thank you for everything you're going to do for us next week too. That's what Shabbat is all about. So, however you choose to celebrate Shavuot or Pentecost, it really should include reading or listening to the first 5 books of Moses, first 5 books of your Bible. These are the times that have been appointed by our Creator according to his calendar, not our calendar. We don't need to make more work for ourselves because we just need to embrace these times as a time to spend with him. It's not rocket science. It's the Bible. I know a lot of people that wish they could visit Israel during these times, but the reality is that not everybody who should be there is actually going to fit there. Israel's only so big. There's just so much room. Don't. I don't know how to say this other than to just say it. Don't get caught up in the syndrome of, we have to go. We need to guard these appointed times the best way that we're able. Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, exiles in Babylon. They weren't able to travel back to Jerusalem to be there for these times. And look at how things turned out for them. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that if you celebrate these appointed feasts that you're going to get out of a fiery furnace or you're going to get out of a lion's den unscathed. But I would speculate, and this is me speculating, that if you choose to celebrate these feasts, you might be surprised at the blessings that you actually do receive from them. I'm going to let that sink in for a second. If you celebrate these feasts, you might be surprised at the blessings you recognize from them. Shavuot is a day to remember. And I know, I know some people say, it's the day the law was given. Not exactly. It's the day that the Creator himself came to meet with his people. And if you read that passage very carefully, you'll see that they saw his words. Even the deaf were able to see his words and understand what he was saying. That's what we're looking at. The sweetest words of the Almighty, spoken from the top of a mountain. That's what Shavuot's all about. Words that were spoken that everyone was able to understand. Words that were spoken that everyone was able to see and hear. Words that were spoken that give us the foundation of how we're designed to live. You only have one God. You've got to honor him. You need to honor the day that he chose to be honored. Don't dishonor your mother and father. Don't lie, don't cheat, don't steal, don't commit adultery. Don't look at something that your neighbor has and say, I want that. You can have one like it, you just can't have that particular one. It's a day when he said, this is how I want you to live. So the next time, we're going to look at the fall feast. I'm not sure how far we'll get. Because when it comes to the fall feast, I tend to get a little long-winded. But at any rate, think about Shavuot. I'm not sure when it comes this year. I haven't looked, to be quite honest. Of course, I haven't looked at when Purim is either. And that's not in Leviticus 23. But I did have a question about that the other day, too. Yeah, I'm getting the look. So, until Monday.
Until Monday.
We wish you many, many blessings,
We
everyone.
sure do.